The campus of Eddington University shimmered with anticipation. It was the morning of the annual Founders' Day Gala, the most prestigious event of the year. Faculty in tailored suits rushed between buildings, students wore their finest dress attire, and caterers meticulously arranged linens, centerpieces, and hors d'oeuvres in the grand ballroom of Old Eddington Hall. Inside, Dean Charles Whitmore, a polished man in his early 60s with silver hair and the self-importance of someone who'd spent decades in academia, paced with a clipboard in hand. Everything had to be perfect. After all, major donors, alumni, and state officials would be in attendance. As he barked orders at the staff and faculty, something caught his eye. A black man in blue janitorial overalls polishing a brass plaque at the entrance of the hall. The man moved with deliberate care, quietly humming to himself, focused on the task. Whitmore's lips thinned. "Hey," he snapped, striding across the marble floor. You shouldn't be here. I gave very specific instructions that all custodial work was to be done before 8. The man stood slowly and turned. He was in his early 30s, tall, with thoughtful eyes and calm energy. His name tag read, Isaiah. "Just wanted to make sure this plaque was spotless for the guests," Isaiah replied evenly, gesturing to the name etched in gold. "Dr. Elijah Reynolds, founder and visionary of Eddington University." Whitmore scoffed. "That's not your concern. You janitors always find ways to hang around when you're not needed. This is a formal event. You're making guests uncomfortable before they even arrive." Isaiah's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Still, he said nothing, just placed his cloth in the back pocket of his overalls. "I expect the service staff to understand boundaries," Whitmore continued, oblivious to his own condescension. "This is a night for scholars and legacy, not background workers trying to feel important." Isaiah stared at him quietly, then gave a small nod. "As you wish, sir." He stepped aside and began walking toward the side exit. As he reached the doors, a professor passing by greeted him warmly. "Isaiah, looking forward to hearing your speech tonight." Whitmore frowned. Speech? Before he could process it, Isaiah disappeared through the doorway, leaving behind a perfectly polished plaque, one with a familiar last name. But Whitmore didn't notice. Not yet. The sun had dipped lower behind the Gothic rooftops of Eddington University, casting a golden hue across the campus. Inside Old Eddington Hall, the chandeliers gleamed overhead as guests arrived in waves. Alumni in elegant suits, board members in silk gowns, politicians, philanthropists, and proud students in polished shoes and nervous smiles. Dean Charles Whitmore stood at the entrance, greeting each one with a calculated smile. He nodded to Senator Doyle, clapped the shoulder of a longtime benefactor, and posed for a photo beside the university crest, arms stiff at his sides. Every minute was choreographed. As servers floated past with trays of champagne and tiny hors d'oeuvres, a young student intern approached him nervously, clutching a program. "Dean Whitmore, sir," she asked. "Would you like to review the speaking order one last time?" "Of course," he replied, snatching the paper and scanning it quickly. He froze. There, nestled between the vice-chancellor and the city mayor, was a name he hadn't expected. Isaiah Reynolds, guest of honor, legacy keynote speaker. Whitmore's brow furrowed. He read it again. His stomach tightened. "Oh, this must be a typo," he muttered. "No, sir," the intern replied. "He's on the program. Dr. Coleman confirmed it. Isaiah Reynolds is the son of Dr. Elijah Reynolds, the founder." Whitmore felt the ground shift beneath him. "That janitor," he whispered, incredulous. "I think he prefers not to advertise who he is," she said softly. "But, yes, he's also an alum. PhD in education reform. He's been funding scholarships through an anonymous donor fund for years." Whitmore stared at the girl as if she'd just spoken a different language. "Reynolds," he whispered again, this time with realization sinking in like cold water. It wasn't just a shared surname. It was his plaque that Isaiah had been cleaning earlier. His father's. The same man Whitmore had dismissed, had insulted, wasn't just part of the legacy. He was the legacy. Suddenly, the ambient music seemed too loud, the champagne too bitter. The polished marble floor beneath him felt unstable, slick with shame he wasn't ready to admit. A murmur rolled through the crowd as the chancellor stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, beaming, tonight we honor a legacy that began generations ago, and one that continues through action, humility, and vision. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Elijah Reynolds' son, and our honored guest. The spotlight turned toward the entrance. Isaiah Reynolds. And through the same door Whitmore had sent him away from just hours ago, Isaiah entered, not in overalls, but in a tailored charcoal suit, his presence calm, grounded, and commanding. The room applauded. Whitmore didn't move. He couldn't. Isaiah Reynolds stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation that he didn't rush to quiet, not because he basked in it, but because he understood its weight. He stood there for a moment, letting the applause settle naturally, his eyes scanning the room. Students, trustees, alumni, professors. Near the back, stiff and pale, Dean Whitmore stared at him, expression unreadable, hands clenched behind his back. Isaiah smiled gently and leaned toward the microphone. Good evening. His voice was calm, rich, the kind that carried even in silence. For some of you, my name may be unfamiliar. Others know me simply as Isaiah. A few of you have seen me on campus this week, likely without thinking twice. Soft chuckles rippled through the crowd. I've walked these halls many times, as a student, as a visitor, and yes, as a quiet observer. Sometimes in a suit, sometimes not. There were no accusations in his tone, only layers. This university was founded by a man who believed in education not as a privilege, but as a responsibility. A man who grew up cleaning schools he wasn't allowed to attend. A man who, despite rejection, built something enduring. He paused. That man was my father, Dr. Elijah Reynolds. The room fell entirely still. Isaiah didn't pause for dramatic effect. He let the truth breathe. My father never wanted this school to cater to the elite. He dreamed of a place where knowledge flowed freely, where the doors opened wide for everyone, not just those with the right name or the right look. He looked out toward the students seated near the front. Legacy to me is not about entitlement. It's about intention. I didn't come back tonight to be celebrated. I came back to serve, to remind us all that the measure of an institution isn't the marble in its halls. It's how it treats the people who walk them, regardless of title. Whitmore shifted. Isaiah didn't look at him directly, but his words reached him like heat. Respect, Isaiah continued, shouldn't be reserved for the name on the door. It should extend to the hands that open it, the ones that clean its floors, and the voices that often go unheard. Applause stirred quietly at first. Then it grew. Isaiah smiled, not proud, but anchored. I am proud to be my father's son, not because of the name, but because of the values he left behind. And tonight I rededicate myself to those values, starting with a full scholarship fund in his name for underrepresented students pursuing education leadership. The applause now swelled into cheers. Because legacy, he said in closing, isn't about being remembered. It's about making others impossible to forget. He stepped back. A standing ovation rose with him. But Isaiah didn't look for Dean Whitmore as he exited the stage. He didn't need to. The silence in Whitmore's heart was already louder than any applause. The ballroom hummed with energy after Isaiah's speech, but Dean Charles Whitmore couldn't hear any of it. The conversations, the congratulations, the excited murmurs about scholarships and legacies, it all rang hollow in his ears. He stood near the refreshment table, untouched wine in hand, watching Isaiah navigate the crowd with poise and grace. Students and professors gathered around him, some asking questions, others simply offering thanks. He greeted each person with the same calm warmth Whitmore remembered from earlier that day. Except now, it hit differently. Whitmore's mouth felt dry. For a man who had built his career on confidence, on certainty, he now felt uncertain. Not just about Isaiah, but about himself. He kept hearing the words from the speech. Respect shouldn't be reserved for the name on the door. That line had cracked something open. Earlier he had spoken down to Isaiah like he was invisible, a background figure, an obstruction. Now, Whitmore realized with painful clarity, Isaiah wasn't the only one he'd treated that way. He'd spent decades walking these halls with a quiet hierarchy in his mind. Who deserved attention, who deserved courtesy, who was worth remembering. Somewhere along the way, he had mistaken tenure for wisdom. And now? He was exposed, not publicly. Isaiah had been gracious enough not to call him out, but internally, Whitmore couldn't escape it. He set the glass down and made his way across the floor, slowly, as if every step carried weight. Isaiah noticed him coming. His expression didn't change. When Whitmore reached him, he hesitated. His voice, when it came, was quieter than usual. "Mr. Reynolds." Isaiah met his eyes. "Dean Whitmore." The pause stretched between them like a tightrope. "I owe you an apology," Whitmore said. A few heads nearby turned subtly. "You do," Isaiah replied. Not harshly, just honestly. Whitmore nodded. "I judged you before I knew you, before I even tried to know you. I let old patterns speak louder than the moment." Isaiah studied him. "Why now?" Whitmore didn't deflect. "Because I just realized how many people I've probably misjudged the same way. And I don't want that to be my legacy here." There it was. A moment of humility, raw and unprotected. Isaiah didn't offer instant forgiveness, but he didn't turn away either. "I appreciate you saying that," he said. "But an apology's only worth something if it leads to action." Whitmore nodded slowly. "Then I hope you'll allow me to start learning, publicly. Not to save face, but to grow." Isaiah extended his hand. "Then start here." They shook, and the room for a moment seemed to exhale. No cameras, no announcements, just two men, one admitting he was wrong, and the other choosing not to return the insult, but to offer a door instead. The next week on campus felt different, not because of a policy change or press release, but because of a shift in tone, a murmur of something new. In classrooms, lounges, and late-night student group chats, people were talking about Isaiah Reynolds, about his speech, and about what it meant to be truly seen on campus. And in the center of it all was Dean Whitmore, slowly coming to grips with the man he'd been and the one he claimed he wanted to become. On Monday morning, Whitmore walked into his office and removed a painting from the wall, a portrait of Eddington's first board of trustees. All white, all stern, all relics of another time. In its place, he hung a framed photo he had found in the university archives. Dr. Elijah Reynolds, young, smiling, standing in front of the very first classroom of what would become Eddington University. Beside him, students of every race. That same day, Whitmore called a staff meeting. He stood before them, professors, coordinators, senior administrators, and said words many had never expected to hear. "I've been here a long time, and for much of that time, I told myself I was upholding tradition. But I now realize in doing so, I overlooked the people and values this university was truly founded on." There were startled expressions, raised brows. "I disrespected someone who embodied the very legacy we claim to honor," he continued. "I won't make that mistake again, and I don't want this institution to either." He introduced a new initiative, an annual Founders Legacy Fellowship named after Dr. Elijah Reynolds, designed to support students from historically excluded communities pursuing leadership in education. It would be funded jointly by the university and matching alumni contributions. The room broke into cautious applause. Not thunderous, not yet, but real. But change is rarely smooth. Later that week, in a closed-door meeting, some board members voiced concern. "Is this about guilt?" one asked. "Are we rewriting history?" another muttered. Whitmore didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "No. This is about telling the truth more fully and living up to it." He wasn't looking for applause now. He was looking for integrity. That evening, he walked across the quad and paused outside the small alumni library, where Isaiah was meeting with a group of students. He didn't interrupt, just watched for a moment. He saw Isaiah laughing with the students, challenging them, encouraging them. No fanfare, no spotlight, just legacy in motion. For the first time in a long while, Whitmore realized something simple but profound. This wasn't about being the smartest man in the room. It was about knowing when to listen. The seminar room in the Alumni Learning Center was modest. Old wood paneling, tall windows, soft afternoon light. A circle of chairs had been arranged in the center, where a group of students sat with notebooks, coffee cups, and anticipation. Isaiah Reynolds sat among them, not at the head of the room, not behind a podium, but shoulder to shoulder, legs crossed, relaxed. His voice was low, thoughtful, honest. "I never meant for any of this to be a performance," he said, meeting their eyes. "I wasn't hiding who I was. I just wanted to see who this place really saw me as when there were no titles attached." A student raised her hand, a sophomore named Jada. "But you could have walked in here as the founder's son, as a donor. Why choose to blend in?" Isaiah smiled faintly. "Because people show you who they are when they think you're nobody." The room fell silent. "I've worked on campuses all over the country, but Eddington is different. My father poured his soul into this place. He believed that education was the great equalizer, that if you built something rooted in dignity, people would rise to meet it." He paused, then added, "But dignity doesn't come from buildings. It comes from how we treat each other." A young man across from him leaned forward. "How did it feel when Dean Whitmore spoke to you like that?" Isaiah was quiet for a moment. "Familiar," he said at last. That word hit harder than any speech. "I've seen it before. The tone, the assumptions. I used to internalize it. Think I had to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, just to earn basic respect." He looked around the room, his voice steady but resolute. "But not anymore. And I don't want you to carry that weight either." One of the students asked, "So why stay? Why give back to a place that didn't recognize you?" Isaiah looked out the window, sunlight catching the edges of his jawline. "Because legacy doesn't belong to the people in charge," he said. "It belongs to those who fight to make it better. My father didn't build this university so it could become a country club with books. He built it so students like you could walk these halls with your heads high, knowing you belong." A few students wiped their eyes. Others nodded in quiet solidarity. "I'm not here for revenge," Isaiah continued. "I'm here for reform. Quiet, consistent, undeniable reform." He leaned back and added, "And that starts with you. Don't just challenge the system. Redesign it." The hour passed too quickly, but no one wanted to leave. As the students gathered their things, Jada lingered behind. Thank you," she said, her voice small but fierce. "This changed something in me." Isaiah smiled and gently touched his chest. "Then my father's dream lives on." Outside, the sky was fading to amber. Students walked back toward dorms and libraries. But something in their posture had shifted. They weren't just students anymore. They were builders. It was the first warm spring day of the season. Cherry blossoms danced on the breeze as the campus buzzed with students heading toward Founders Plaza, a wide-open courtyard at the center of Eddington University. Today was the dedication ceremony, the unveiling of a new bronze statue to honor Dr. Elijah Reynolds, the university's founder. The crowd was the largest anyone had seen in years. Students packed the lawn. Faculty stood shoulder to shoulder. Alumni flew in from across the country. And at the front of it all, standing beside a velvet-draped statue, was Isaiah Reynolds. He wore a sharp navy blue suit, but no tie. His hands were folded in front of him, calm, focused. To his left stood Dean Whitmore, holding a speech, but for once, he didn't speak first. The chancellor introduced Isaiah with warmth and reverence, and then stepped aside. Isaiah approached the podium slowly, gazing out over a sea of faces, many of them familiar now. Students he had mentored, professors who had apologized, even custodial workers standing proudly near the front. He began, "Today, we're not just unveiling a statue, we're revealing a truth." He paused, letting that line settle. "My father founded this university because he believed education should liberate, not intimidate. That knowledge should belong to everyone, not just those born into access. And while we've come a long way, we still carry scars from the old ways." He glanced at Dean Whitmore, not with anger, but with clarity. "A few weeks ago, I stood here invisible to some, dismissed because of my uniform, judged because I didn't walk in with a title on my chest. But I wasn't angry, I was ready. The crowd listened in stillness. Because legacy, Isaiah continued, isn't something you wear. It's something you prove. And I came here to prove that my father's dream was still alive, that we could rise above habit and ego and choose respect over assumption. He turned to the covered statue, fingers resting on the velvet. My father believed in building. So today, I offer this monument, not to him alone, but to the idea that we can do better, that every student, every worker, every stranger who walks this campus feels seen. He pulled the cloth away. The bronze figure stood tall, Dr. Elijah Reynolds in mid-stride, holding a book in one hand, the other reaching out. The plaque below read, Dr. Elijah Reynolds, founder, dreamer, builder of opportunity. The crowd erupted in applause, not the polite kind, but real, raw celebration. When it quieted, Dean Whitmore stepped forward. His voice was different now, stripped of arrogance. I once thought tradition was about preserving what was, but today Isaiah has taught us that true tradition means honoring our roots while growing beyond them. I was wrong, and I am grateful, truly, to be learning from those I once overlooked. He looked at Isaiah. From this day forward, I will not just stand by legacy, I will serve it. Then something unexpected happened. Whitmore removed the lapel pin from his blazer, the dean's seal, and handed it to Isaiah. You may not want this, he said softly, but I hope it reminds you that this place will always be yours too. Isaiah took it, nodded, and the two men stood side by side beneath the statue, not as rivals, but as witnesses to change. Above them, cherry blossoms drifted like confetti across the sky.